for joining us today for our webinar on how a private cloud can transform your law practice in 2018. This webinar is hosted by Uptime Legal. My name is Andrew Cabasso, and I'm the Managing Director of the JurisPage division here at Uptime Legal. And joining me today is Uptime Legal CEO, Dennis Dimka, who will be joining us to talk about how a private cloud can transform your law practice. Dennis, I'll hand things over to you, and let's just dive in.
Sounds great, Andrew. Thank you for that introduction. And thank everybody who's joining for joining us today on our webinar on how a private cloud can transform your law practice in 2018. So quick introduction, a little bit about me. I'm, of course, Dennis Dimka of Uptime Legal Systems. My personal background is in technology and IT, and today I spend my days advising law firms on legal technology, what technology might be the best fit, what kind of paths they should take, how to leverage technology to build a better practice. And in doing so, over the decade plus that Uptime Legal has been around, I and Uptime Legal have moved hundreds of law firms to the cloud. And in doing so, I've definitely seen the right and the wrong way to use technology and the right and the wrong way to move to the cloud. And I hope to share some of those lessons learned today. So on our docket for today, I'm going to start by, at the beginning, and kind of big picture, just talking about what are, generally speaking, big picture, the cloud solutions used by law firms today. And then I'll dive into our main event, which is how a private cloud can transform your law practice. After that, I'll talk a little bit about doing your due diligence. If you do decide, or to at least explore private cloud options, how to do due diligence in a suitable way. Then I'll cover some further reading if you do want to learn more, and I'll wrap it up with some Q&A. So as Andrew said on the beginning, as you think of things, as I'm kind of going through different resources and material, if it makes you think of a question or you just have a question, please type it into your chat window at any time in the presentation, and we'll work through those questions as soon as we're able at the very end. So throughout our presentation, we'll have a number of poll questions just to kind of get a read from the audience of where people are at, what they're thinking about. So for that first poll question, I'll ask everyone, is your firm currently leveraging the cloud in some fashion? Yes or no? And that could be a private cloud already. That could be cloud-based storage like Dropbox. That could be web-based accounting software, anything like that, the cloud in some fashion.
All right, the poll is now open. So if you would all please pop open your GoToWebinar, pick up your GoToWebinar screens, you're going to see a poll that asks, is your law firm currently leveraging the cloud in some fashion? Yes, no, or unsure. We're going to wait a few seconds to let everyone respond. And then once we have some more votes, we will check out the responses and see where everyone is at. Dennis, any guesses?
Yeah, we asked this question a lot, and I want to say last time it was something to the effect of 66% said yes, or 2/3 were using some cloud solution. So because I'm not a gambling man, I'm going to go with 66%.
I take it you're not betting on the World Cup this week?
No. I don't know enough about it.
That's the beauty of it, though. All right, let's close the poll. And so you actually had pretty good odds. The is your law firm currently leveraging the cloud in some fashion? Yes was the winner at 70%. No at 30%.
It's interesting.
So it
wasn't too long ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't too long ago that the cloud was this new sort of potentially scary thing. So that's really great to hear that people are adopting it in some way.
Absolutely.
So that said, I'll dive right into cloud solutions for law firms. And I'm going to start kind of big picture because really a private cloud is one component of the overarching thing we know as the cloud, meaning it's one way to use cloud technology to build a better firm. And by now we've all heard lots and lots about the cloud, especially over the last decade. But what we see here at Uptime Legal and what I still see is a fair amount of confusion around what the cloud is, what it means, and I think most importantly, how a law firm can leverage it in a suitable way. So to start things off, I thought I'd start really at that beginning and kind of take a step back and zoom out and define what are ultimately the three categories of cloud solutions used by businesses and by law firms. And this is a bit simplified. Obviously, there are cloud solutions that have nothing to do with law firms or business, like cloud-based music and things like that. But for the purpose of this discussion, I'm just going to talk about technologies used by law firms. Um, so what you have are really these three categories that you see on this slide. These are kind of, generally speaking, the three categories, the first of which being cloud storage, or sometimes cloud storage and backups you can kind of lump together. So that's going to be things like your Dropbox, Google Drive, OneDrive. And they're essentially basic file and data storage. They will store or host files and folders, but nothing more. Nothing less, but nothing more. They cannot host software. They can just hold files and folders. And they are either used as primary storage, or in some cases it's used as a backup. So think of your Mozy or your Carbonite. Those are backup iterations of that. And I'll sometimes be asked, hey, I'm running, and I'm just going to pick an example, I'm running Time Matters. Can I host that on Google Drive? And of course, the answer is no. So that's cloud storage. The next category you have is one that probably everyone is familiar with and probably is thought of as the most synonymous with just the cloud in general, and that's cloud apps or web apps or cloud-based software. So these are software applications that are web-based, meaning you run them in a web browser. The pros are, of course, many, but there's no software to install because it's, again, in a web browser. No servers required, minimal or no IT support required, things like that. So this is going to be apps ranging from QuickBooks Online to Salesforce to even some of the legal case management apps like Rocket Matter, Clio, Cosmolex, so on and so forth. So there's a lot of pros. The cons today, if not necessarily doing a pros and a cons, but the cons, if there was one, was a lot of times these web-based applications tend to be more basic and limited to their non-web-based counterparts. And I'll expand on that in a little bit. And really the third category of cloud solutions used by law firms is the private cloud, sometimes also referred to more generally as a hosted solution. And that is what we're going to cover today. So to describe what a private cloud is and why it's often a useful platform for law firms, I'm going to do kind of a side-by-side comparison and sidestep for a moment to talk about the different kinds of legal practice management software. So for a moment, forget cloud-based or not cloud-based, just think of practice management software in general. So generally, legal practice management apps help firms manage their cases and their practice, and they all include a lot of the same fundamental components. So things like client case management, calendaring, task management, time tracking, billing, and sometimes accounting. So generally speaking, that's what they all do. And today, a law firm can either subscribe to a web-based practice management solution, which is what you see in the left-hand column here, and which really falls under that middle category that I talked about just a minute ago, or premise-based practice management software. And by premise-based, I mean software that isn't cloud-based, that you traditionally buy a server, own a server, and install that software on it. Many law firms today use, prefer, and or are committed to traditional or premise-based legal practice management software for a variety of reasons, and those reasons I'll explore in a minute. And that's really what a private cloud is all about. And examples of those premise-based applications are here on the right column. So not an exhaustive list, but applications like Time Matters, PC Law, Pro Law, Needles, Tabs 3, Adirant, Juris. So if you use any of those, you may know what I mean when I say you're committed to it, you rely on it. So those applications, those premise-based or server-based applications, traditionally require a server. If you want to use the software, you have to get a server. And historically, for decades, that's meant that the firm had to buy and maintain a server in-house. Not so today. Today, a law firm can take that same software, maybe Pro Law, maybe PC Law, and they can either host it on premise, as they've always been able to do, or they can host it in a private cloud. So I said that these applications require a server. And in the case of a private cloud is the server. So a private cloud, in effect, makes non-cloud software cloud-based. Or said another way, a private cloud will cloudify otherwise on-premise software. And with the right private cloud package, it'll do more than that. It will package in and provide other essential IT and technology services, things like IT support and email hosting and other things. So all that said, I've sort of described what a private cloud is kind of conceptually. In terms of nuts and bolts, what is a private cloud really? What does it include? What does it provide? To sort of deconstruct it, this is sort of what it looks like. So a private cloud is really the combination of these things. A private cloud is apps, meaning hosting of your legal software, storage, so cloud-based storage for your documents and your data, Office. Typically, though not always, a private cloud offering will include the Microsoft Office suite, so you have that as part of your operating environment, and email by a hosted exchange. Now, a private cloud is ultimately, under the hood, a server or a series of servers like any other. And just like any other server, that server needs backups, maintenance, monitoring, security. And in the case of a private cloud, that's all managed for you, which is part of the goal. And IT support, generally speaking. A private cloud sometimes does, or in our view, always should include all the necessary software support and IT support that a law firm needs, right? To kind of be a holistic package. So said another way, in a sentence or less, a private cloud is an integrated end-to-end solution that hosts and provides support for all of your firm's technology. So now that you hopefully have a better understanding of what a private cloud really is, you might wonder what software can be hosted in a private cloud. Can my software run in a private cloud? So to the answer of what can be hosted, the short answer is almost anything. Virtually any Windows-based software can be hosted and run within a private cloud. Because a private cloud is, it's more than this, but it's really just a server hosted and managed by a team or a company that's in the business of doing that. So whether it's on these applications are on a server in your building or in a private cloud is really of no consequence to the software. And this list that you see here is also not an exhaustive list, but a slightly expanded list of all the different applications that can be run in a private cloud and that are often used by law firms. So we've talked theory, we've talked kind of conceptually what a private cloud is all about. The next question may become, how does it work? What does it look like? So practically, in the case of a private cloud, picture your software, right now that your law firm uses today. You might use some practice management software. You might use document management software. You might have separate accounting software, QuickBooks. You also may have a file system where you keep your files and folders, your G drive or your S drive. You also have Outlook for email and perhaps a smattering of other miscellaneous applications you use for one thing or another, a child support calculator, a real estate HUD generator, those kinds of things. So in the case of a private cloud, all those applications are no longer installed on your servers and desktops, but rather on the private cloud. So then nothing is really installed on your local desktop. Then you or each user in your firm logs into their own dedicated private virtual desktop. And within that virtual desktop is where they or you will find your software, your apps, your G drive, or whatever drive you're using, your Outlook, and really all the things your law firm uses to function. And the benefit of that is there's several. The primary benefit is you're really untethered from your desktop. You don't think of when you get a new computer, and maybe right now the process is, oh my gosh, new computer, that means I have to reinstall my main software, reconnect all my printers, this big stick process. In the case of a private cloud, you don't. You unbox it, log into your virtual desktop, and there you are. So it really allows you to move from machine to machine, from the office to home, or anywhere, and log into your virtual desktop, and there's all your stuff just where you left it. And another benefit is that it really gives you and each user in your firm a consistent desktop environment, no matter your device or location. When you log into your virtual desktop, all of your software, down to all of your shortcuts and how they're placed on your desktop, are uniform from one machine to the next. So I'll take a moment and ask my next poll question. And that question is, if your firm is using the cloud now, so the 70% that is, how? What tools or services are you using?
All right, and the poll is now open. If you all please answer our poll questions. The poll is out. If your firm is using the cloud now, how? Are you using a web-based software such as web-based practice management software? Using cloud-based storage like Dropbox, OneDrive, or Google Drive? Are you using a private cloud or virtual desktop now, or not? Are you not using the cloud? We'll wait for a few more votes to come in, and then we will close this poll down. And if you haven't voted yet, if you'd please look at your GoToWebinar screen, you'll see the poll is open and you can cast your vote. We'll just take a few seconds and then we'll close that down. So get your votes in before those are locked down. All right, and we are closing the polls now. So sharing the results. Is your firm using the cloud now? If so, how? This actually falls really well on our 70-30, not using the cloud versus using the cloud. If you're using the cloud, 50% of you are using cloud-based storage and 20% are using web-based software.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. I'm happy to see, in general, I'm sort of evangelical about it, law firms using the cloud, because there's just, law firms especially, I mean, every business benefits from the cloud, but law firms especially just have so much to gain in terms of better productivity, better uptime, less drama, less headaches. It's really good to hear. And with that, I'll sort of shift into really our main event, which is, now that you know what a private cloud is, we'll talk about how a private cloud will transform your law practice. And I'll sort of frame it in the way of 7 reasons to move your law firm to a private cloud. 7 reasons or 7 benefits that are significant and that your law firm will realize right away by moving to a private cloud. So reason number 1 why you should move to a private cloud: because you're tired of dealing with servers, IT headaches, and downtime. And a lot of you, I imagine, are nodding your head. Servers are expensive. Maintaining them is more expensive. And that expense comes in a couple of formats. It sometimes comes in the form of proactive IT management, or at least hopefully it does. Hopefully you are being proactive and having an IT person or group proactively maintain and manage your systems. But it also comes in the form of reactive or break-fix support, meaning despite those of you who are on top of things with your technology, and despite your best efforts with being proactive and maintaining and managing your infrastructure and your IT, there's still going to be problems. You'll still deal with server or system downtime. You'll still deal with software that becomes corrupt. You may deal with printers that don't work. There's always problems I'll hear, and I'll often ask law firms, what are the challenges? Describe the frustration that's led you to us. And it's these kinds of things, users that can't log in. And the underlying sort of vibe or feeling or thing I'll hear again and again and again is this one. It's always something. There's always some problem, something wrong, somebody can't do something, something's down, and there's some unexpected cost that we have to pay or incur to deal with it. Now, as compared to an on-premise environment, a private cloud provides or includes, by comparison, a reliable server infrastructure with all the necessary redundancies that a Fortune 500 caliber infrastructure would have, and that everybody should have. Private cloud provides or includes all the maintenance, as I mentioned, from backups to system monitoring to preventative care. All of that is part of the service and sort of happens behind the scenes, so you're not having to do that. Software updates are handled for you, including, and perhaps most importantly, your legal software. So if you're running ProLaw or Tabs 3 or Needles, every so often there's going to be an update to that software. And applying that update can sometimes be a small undertaking and sometimes be a very large one. But having that managed for you is often part of a private cloud service and something that should be done for you. And down to your local network configuration and troubleshooting is sometimes managed by the provider, meaning in addition to the cloud and everything in it, you still have desktops, laptops, printers, scanners, a wireless router, a firewall, things like that, and often a private cloud. Well, I shouldn't say often, I'll say sometimes a private cloud includes that. And you may notice that I put an asterisk at the end of those last two bullets. And those are asterisks because they're not always. And the asterisk there is with the right private cloud provider or the right legal-centric provider, those will be part of the service and managed for you. So reason number 2, why you should seriously consider private cloud. You need to be able to work anywhere on any device. So as I touched on a little bit earlier, being tethered to a single desktop or laptop computer is a real problem for a modern law firm. So when you're not in the cloud, all of your software resides on your local server, which limits your access to in the office only. With a private cloud, by comparison, you can work anytime, anywhere, on any device. And all of your firm's software and documents and data are all installed and reside on the private cloud, as I described. Because remember, the private cloud is the server. And everyone in your firm logs into and works from that virtual desktop, like that demonstration I showed you earlier, and works from there. So each employee of your firm can log into their personalized virtual desktop from any device, PC, Mac, iPad, etc. And as I showed you, within their virtual desktop, that's where they're going to find their practice management software, their other apps, their files, their folders, their email, everything. And what we see real world is that being able to work anytime, anywhere, on any device gives a law firm a pretty significant strategic advantage. They, or you would be able to in this scenario, be able to manage your cases and your clients better and faster. Reason number 3, why you should seriously consider a private cloud, because you take cybersecurity seriously. Cybersecurity breaches make headlines almost daily at this point, and hackers and other cyber criminals, they're only becoming more sophisticated. And what's funny about that today in 2018 is on occasion I'll be talking to a law firm, and I don't mean to poke fun at this particular person I was talking with, but I will for a moment. I'll be talking to a law firm that currently has on-premise IT, and they tell me that they're concerned about security in the cloud. They're concerned that their data is less secure in the cloud and would be more secure if their data stayed on their server within their 4 walls. And they believe that just by virtue of putting their data in the cloud, it's somehow more susceptible to being compromised. And that almost as if to say that their sheetrock walls make their data more safe, which of course is silly. Because the truth is, if A, you have a server, and B, you have internet connectivity in that same office, which of course you do, your firm and your data is already on the cloud. Your server and the data within it, when it's connected to the internet, it's just as accessible to hackers, and probably more so. So your data is exposed to the cloud in either scenario, right? Either on-premise or in the cloud. The only difference really becomes who's in charge of maintaining security. If you have an on-premise server today, the answer to that question is you and any IT consultants you hire. And even the best IT consultants aren't watching your infrastructure 24/7 by 365 because they can't, right? Because you're one of hundreds of clients or a dozen clients. But a private cloud, on the other hand, will be built from the ground up with security in mind, at least assuming it's a good one. A good private cloud company is going to be in the business of really one thing, building and managing a secure environment to store sensitive data. And as a result, a good law firm cloud platform will include things like what you see in this list, right? So a good secure private cloud includes things like enterprise-grade firewalls, intrusion detection and prevention, 24/7 security monitoring, meaning looking for things like failed login attempts, known hack attempts, things like that. Military-grade encryption, 2-factor authentication, password policies, endpoint security, physical data center access control, so think like biometrics, things like that. And we'll have some measure of audits or process by which they make sure that stuff is happening all the time. And this list here isn't Cadillac. I would say this is fairly standard fare, I would honestly say a minimum requirement for any business that stores sensitive information. And if you're a law firm, that's probably you.
I just wanted to cut in for a second and say that we're getting a bunch of questions. So to let you know, if in the audience, we will answer these questions at the Q&A at the end, but please keep your questions coming, and we'll absolutely get to them at the Q&A at the very end. Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Yeah, as Andrew said, please don't necessarily wait until the end to ask your questions in case you forget. Please feel free to punch them in now, as I'm talking through this stuff. So to wrap it up, that's cybersecurity. And again, I think that a key here is that compare this level of security, this bulleted list, to a typical single server sitting in the coat closet of a law firm. And I don't mean to poke fun, but it's a security risk. So reason number 4, because you're tired of a decentralized law firm. So as far as technology goes, as a law firm, life is fairly simple when your law firm is confined to one single location. But once you add that first satellite office or that first employee who works remotely, things get complex quickly. So giving access to your applications and your documents and your data to employees who work outside of where your on-premise server is, meaning your main office, is tricky and often clunky. So you might try setting up a VPN. You might hire your local IT guy to set up a VPN or log me in or some other remote access tool. And the problem with all of those is they tend to be slow and clunky, and they generally irritate your employees and making working outside of your office really just a pain. And if any of you have tried that, you know exactly what I mean. And I see this a lot when a law firm, especially a growing firm, expands into its second office, or maybe it joins forces or acquires another firm and they have that second location. The main office works just fine, like it always has. Everything kind of hums along fairly happily. But the other locations, or maybe the new guy or gal working from home, have to deal with this jerry-rigged remote access solution, and they generally hate life. That's one scenario, and it's no fun. Another one I see is, say, a firm that has two offices, a staff at each, and they have a local server at each location, which not only means twice the IT to manage, and therefore twice the costs and twice the headaches, but a very disjointed, decentralized system that, quite honestly, functions more like two separate law firms than one. So with a private cloud in that scenario, or any scenario, everything becomes centralized. Your law firm's case management software, accounting software, data, email, again, all lives in one single central system. So everyone in your firm, regardless of where they work from, logs into the same system and has the same working experience as everybody else. Everything is centralized. Reason number 5, why you should seriously consider a private cloud. Because you're ready to graduate from web apps. So remember just a little bit ago when I described the difference between web-based and premise-based legal practice management software. Sometimes when a new law firm is starting up, they're inclined to start with web-based software because they're low cost and they're easy to get into, which is understandable. Another scenario I'll see is a law firm, maybe that's a little bit larger or mid-size, that's been around for a while, that uses server-based practice management software today, but they want to move to the cloud. And maybe they don't even know what a private cloud is, and that's an option. But they want to move to the cloud because of some of the benefits I've talked about today: better security, lower headache level, less cost, less IT, less drama. And their first inclination is sometimes, and I hear this a lot, to switch from their current server-based practice management software to something web-based. Now, those web-based legal practice management apps, like the ones I mentioned earlier, they're easy to use, they're affordable, and they're good for solos and very small practices to implement practice management without having to make a big investment into IT. But the problem is, even after 10 plus years of development, which is how long some of the longest running ones have been around, these web-based applications still aren't quite as sophisticated and don't do as much as their server-based counterparts do. So again, the applications that I mentioned earlier, and I'll just name a few, Tabs 3, PC Law, Time Matters, Pro Law, they've had a multi-decade head start in terms of building a product with lots of features. And as a result, their functions are simply more robust and more nuanced. And I say that a lot, and sometimes I'll be asked to qualify that statement. So I put together this chart that's general, it's a generalization, but it's a pretty good side-by-side of comparison of what you can expect in a web-based practice management app, kind of in the middle column, and what you'll see in a server-based app on the right. So generally speaking, the first four rows are things that both sides of the coin do pretty reliably, right? They all do client management, case management, calendaring, time and billing. Web-based, server-based, they all do that. Now the next two items is where it gets a little fuzzy. The server-based applications tend to do these, and that's accounting, like business accounting and trust accounting. And some of the more finer points of case management, like form assembly or document assembly. Some of the web apps out there do it now, but on a limited basis. Some don't do it at all. And then when you kind of get into the deeper functionality, the more, I'll say, sophisticated stuff like docketing, rules-based calendaring, matter screens by practice area, meaning a special screen just for personal injury cases or a special screen just for an estate planning matter, flexible billing, robust financial reporting. That's when the web-based applications really don't provide a lot of functionality, but the server-based ones do. So either because you use a web app and you're ready to graduate to something more sophisticated, and as your law firm grows, your needs will become more sophisticated. Or whether you're a law firm already using a server-based practice management application and you're considering switching to a web app, I'm not saying don't, but I am saying make sure you really understand what features you use of your current software before changing applications. Because I've seen a lot of people make that change and come back inside of 6 months. Reason number 6, because you use Mac computers. Now, this one won't apply to everyone, but Mac computers are becoming more and more prevalent in the business world in general, including small law firms. And Macs are natively great for simple web-based applications, such as the Google G Suite or some of the web-based practice management apps that I just talked about. But Macs cannot natively run Windows-based software, which, like it or not, is what the more robust, mature legal software tends to be. Now, I won't get into the classic PC versus Mac debate, but I will point out the fact is that most legal practice management and document management software tends to be Windows-based. So if your law firm uses any of the applications that I've mentioned, again, WorldDocs, Tabs, Pro Law, PC Law, you already know that you can't run those on a Mac computer, at least not natively. So once again, a private cloud solves this problem. Whether your whole firm is Mac-based, or maybe you've just got 1 or 2 people that use a Mac in the office, or a couple of people that use Macs from home, a private cloud will allow you to have your cake and eat it too. So with a private cloud, all of your software is installed again in the private cloud, which is natively a Windows-based system, but you can log in and work from any device, as I said, including Macs, iPads, things like that. So potentially really a cake and eat it too situation for Mac users. Reason number 7, because you want to get your IT costs under control. So generally speaking, on-premise IT costs, or IT costs when you're on-premise, are generally high. They often come, or they almost always come, with large capital expenditures every 3 to 5 years. Every 3 to 5 years, you have to recycle your servers. And the costs tend to be very unpredictable. They're up and down. You know, all of a sudden, without warning, that something will crash, you'll need to replace it. That the cost might come in replacement hardware costs, and it often comes in the form of IT consulting costs. They're up and down, which makes them difficult to budget. And by comparison, a private cloud costs similar or less. I'd say, generally speaking, if you're doing things right on premise, a private cloud is comparably cost to doing things on premise, but I think more importantly at a very fixed and predictable price, right? No ups and downs. And by comparison, a private cloud really, and again, with the right private cloud solution, it really is inclusive of all of the other miscellaneous technology components and costs that you're incurring today. So what I mean by that is a private cloud, as I said, is sort of that holistic end-to-end solution. And in doing so, it replaces a lot of your onesie-twosie costs that might be monthly, might be once a year, but they're there and they cost you real money. So what I mean by that is a private cloud eliminates the cost of on-premise servers, obviously, server maintenance and repair, replacing those servers every 3 to 5 years, Windows and SQL licensing, backup hardware, backup software, and disaster recovery, the cost of unplanned disasters, which are significant. A lot of our now clients were affected by Hurricane Sandy, and their costs, both tangible and intangible, were significant before moving to a private cloud. Things like Office 365 fees, you're probably paying something annually or monthly for local antivirus, expensive workstations, and of course, managed IT fees, IT support fees, and software support fees. So all of those things are costs you're incurring to one degree or another today, or if you're on premise, I should say. And with a private cloud, all of that is replaced with, again, typically a single monthly fee and a predictable one. Now, everyone does it different, but that's generally what you can expect in a private cloud. So now that I've covered what I'll call the 7 top reasons for moving to a private cloud, I would love to hear from you guys what for your firm is the top driver behind exploring the cloud.
All right, and our next poll is open. Please open your GoToWebinar screens and check out this poll. What for your firm is a top driver behind exploring the cloud? Are you tired of, and this is like, what is your top reason for it? I know you may have multiple reasons. Are you tired of dealing with servers and IT headaches? Do you need to be able to work remotely? Want to increase cybersecurity? You're tired of decentralized technology or other, whether it's using Macs, lowering costs, needing more advanced apps. Yeah, so I'm curious to hear what the biggest driver is and reason is for all of you.
Yeah, I once asked a similar question in another webinar, and I remember predicting that the winner would be tired of dealing with IT headaches, and that wasn't. It was number 2. Number 1 was remote access, which I won't say is surprising, but was interesting.
All right, we'll wait another few seconds for everyone to cast their votes, and then we'll close down the poll. And now the poll is officially closed, and let's see what the votes are. Tired of dealing with servers and IT headaches comes in second place at 30%. Want to increase cybersecurity is 40%, and that is our winner today.
That's good to hear. It's good to hear because obviously taking the security of your data is very important. This is not just your firm's data, it's your client's data. And often, but not always, is that urgent, or does it seem urgent when talking to a law firm? So that's great to hear. Good for you guys. So now that I've covered what a private cloud is, how it works, and how it will benefit or transform your firm, I want to take just a few minutes and explore how to find the right private cloud for your law firm. Because not all clouds are created equal. So in terms of doing your due diligence, and we've written about that very subject a lot, and I'll share some resources when we're done here on how to do that. But I'll start with what to avoid when looking for a private cloud company. For starters, avoid small fly-by-night companies. And unfortunately, being a relatively new industry, there are a fair amount of those. Avoid the local IT company that now, quote, does cloud too. We see that a lot. Local IT companies, and I'm sure they're very capable IT guys, most of them, are, they're losing a lot of business to the cloud as more and more of their clients move to the cloud, and as a result, they're kind of spinning up their own cloud offerings and saying, me too. And the problem is number one, it's new to them. Just because you're a good IT person doesn't necessarily mean you're good at building and managing a cloud environment. And two, they're often reselling other big box public cloud providers, which really limits. It's a quality control issue, really. So avoid that. Even your IT company, and I hate to say that, but it's true. Unless your IT company happens to also have been doing this for a long time and does it for a lot of law firms, I would say steer clear. Avoid any cloud hosting or cloud service provider that isn't exclusively committed to law firms. Law firms are special, right? They have unique needs, unique software, unique urgencies. And if they're not committed to law firms, they're not going to be able to support your software and understand the culture and the flow of a law firm. And to test for that, I would say avoid companies that can't provide at least 10 or more references that are law firms. A lot of people will say, "Oh yeah, we service a lot of law firms. That's something we're really focused on." So ask them to prove it. And ultimately, all of these amount to high-risk options. These are all the high-risk options. And being the good, diligent law firm owner that you are, or law firm manager that you are, you're looking for the low-risk option. And of course, the risks of selecting the wrong cloud service provider are many, but here are some real world ones and probably the most common ones. And how we get this data, by the way, in case you're ever curious, is whenever somebody comes to us and says, "Hey, I'm with a really, I'm on a poor platform or with a poor company now," we'll ask them to tell us what problems they've run into. And this is what they say: data loss, losing data, security breach, downtime and lost productivity. That's probably the most common one. Downtime either insofar as the whole system is down or one application is down. Nobody can log into PC Law, things like that. Another one is a very limited support scope. And what I mean by that is, and this kind of comes back to that law firm specialty, a generalist, I'll call it, cloud service provider that will service any industry, oftentimes drives some really hard lines between what they will and won't support. And they often take an approach of, "Hey, look, if you can log into your cloud, if you can get into your virtual desktop, our job here is done, right? We can't get into the nuances and into the weeds with your legal software because we're not experts in that software, and it's not our software." So that limited support scope is unfortunately common, so you want to avoid companies where that might be a risk. Similarly, lack of familiarity with your software, that is a risk of picking the wrong cloud service provider. And ultimately, unplanned costs or fees. Because of that limited support scope, those unplanned costs or fees may come in the form of the cloud provider themselves charging you extra, or in some cases I've seen they'll charge kind of an hourly rate for any work beyond just simple hosting. Or in the form of your local IT person still must be in the mix because your new cloud service provider doesn't cover everything, and now you're incurring fees from both sides. So those are some of the risks of selecting the wrong cloud service provider. I'll give you just 8 points real quick on some important due diligence points, what you should be looking for or asking or thinking about as you evaluate potential cloud service providers. Number one, make sure they're what we call a cloud-first company, meaning ensure that that cloud hosting is that company's primary focus. And what I mean by that is, as opposed to, for instance, again, a local IT company, a telecom or internet provider, or in some cases a software company that's now trying to do cloud hosting themselves. The reason, again, is expertise and propriety. Two, again, I'm repeating myself a little bit, but I think it's important. Ensure that the provider is exclusively committed to the legal industry. Again, the software that you use is unique. There are, I don't know, let's just say for simplicity's sake, 100 different industries in this country. Each industry might have 30 or 40 major applications that are used within that industry. A cloud service provider could never, ever be experts in everything. There's just no way. So it's important that you select a company that is committed to legal and knows your software. Industry reputation. Make sure whoever you are considering, those suitors, are well regarded in the legal communities, the technical communities, and generally in the business communities. Things to look for are awards, bar association mentions, accolades, things like that. Reviews. It's very easy today to find reviews on a company, good, bad, or otherwise, and I encourage you to do just that. Data sovereignty. Ensure that your data will always be stored exclusively in the US or Canada. US if you're US, Canada if you're a Canadian firm, of course. And while that might sound obvious, some of the so-called public cloud services, so things like Office 365, Dropbox, and a few others, do or at least say they may store your data overseas or back up your data overseas, which creates data sovereignty and ethical issues for you. Similarly, data ownership. We always encourage our clients to read the fine print and make sure your data stays yours. That too might sound obvious, but a lot of some of the public cloud services out there, if you read the fine print, it's at best ambiguous if the data remains yours when you store it in their cloud. 6, backups and cybersecurity. Make sure that the provider has a comprehensive backup, recovery, and cybersecurity system in place. And ask them to show you, meaning show some documentation or talk you through their plan. 7, infrastructure and data center. Ensure the provider owns their own equipment and they're not just simply reselling another public cloud. Because again, it will really limit their ability to provide support and to be accountable for the performance of the cloud system. And this last one applies to some software, but not all, and that's support and authorization. Depending on what software you use for practice management and other, make sure that that provider is an authorized hosting provider for that software. Some applications, some software companies don't have any policies on that, some do. So that's how to do, or at least a teaser on how to do your due diligence. And I'll share with everybody some further reading that I recommend if this subject interests you and you want to learn more. We have a lot of great material right on our website, and I've hand-selected just a couple of resources that I think are relevant that I think you'll find interesting. The first is our ebook called Law Office in the Cloud. It's about how and why to move your law firm to the cloud. In this ebook, we cover what I covered today in a little more depth, the private cloud in general, and it also explores some of the different leading legal practice management apps out there if you're also looking at different apps. On the subject of doing your due diligence, this is a good one. It's a relatively new white paper of ours, 25 Things to Ask Your Legal Cloud Service Provider. This is a list of 25 due diligence points that you should be asking every single person or company you're considering for the cloud. Lastly, if cybersecurity, since it was the top reason, at least in this particular poll today, we've published our law firm cybersecurity survival guide, how to protect your firm and your client data. Definitely recommend you read that one. All of those and more are available at our library, which is at uptimelegal.com/library. We're going to do questions and answers in just a moment, but if we didn't get to yours or if you think of something later, please don't hesitate to email me directly. I'm at dennis.dimka@uptimelegal.com. And now for our final poll question. Would you like Uptime Legal, someone from Uptime Legal, to contact you to discuss private cloud solutions for your firm?
All right, and the poll is now open. Please look in your GoToWebinar screen and submit your feedback in the poll. Would you like Uptime Legal to contact you to discuss a private cloud for your firm after this webinar is concluded? Yes or no? Please share your feedback, and then we'll, in a few seconds, we'll close this out, and then we'll do some Q&A. We have a bunch of great questions that will get answered for you.
We may run a little over, so those of you who can stay a few minutes longer for more Q&A, great. If you can't, of course, we appreciate your attendance.
And if you haven't answered the poll question yet, please do so, and then we'll close it out, and then we'll get to Q&A. Just a few more seconds, and then we'll close this out. And if you haven't answered yet, please share your feedback. All right, and we're going to close out the poll now, and we'll take some Q&A.
Perfect.
All right, the first question we got is, how are add-ons handled if you have an app running in the cloud, like numbering assistant in Word or Workshare or something like that?
It's a very good question. The answer is in a private cloud such as ours, um, the software and the Office suite will be installed and loaded into the same system or the same place so that any add-ons will work. So classic examples, and there are many, but a classic example might be PC Law's add-in so that you can synchronize your PC Law calendar with your Outlook calendar, or Pro Law's Office add-ins, which are extensive. And it is important that your Office suite and your file system and your files and folders live in the same place as your practice management software. Sometimes people will ask, hey, I just want to move my, X application to the cloud, and everything else I want to leave either on-premise or where it is. And that can be done, and there are situations where that works, but in many it doesn't because of add-ons and because of the integration between practice management software and the Office suite.
Okay, great, thank you. And if anyone else has any questions, please feel free to ask them in the Q&A question section on the GoToWebinar screen, and we will make sure to get to them. Next question we have is, how does a private cloud work for Macs?
So the short answer is you install a very simple RDP client, which is a very small piece of software that's free. I believe it's available in the iTunes store on your Mac. And then from there, you can log into your virtual desktop from your Mac. When you do so, your virtual desktop, which again is where all of your applications and data lives, goes full screen. It's on the Mac. You can flip back and forth from it, right? So you can switch from your virtual desktop to your local or your Mac desktop, allowing you to do everything you need to do from your Mac. And I hope that explanation makes sense. And if not, feel free to reach out to me, and I'll try to elaborate even more.
Yep, and I can also speak personally to this. I personally have been using a Mac, and at Uptime Legal here, we use the remote desktop for a lot of things. And so basically on my Mac, I have an app that will log into my remote desktop, which is Windows based. And so it's kind of like running Parallels similar to, but it's basically opening another computer in the cloud somewhere, basically. And so if I want to use Windows exclusive apps, I can do that through remote desktop, and it's pretty easy to use. One interesting thing had been, obviously, if you have a Mac, you know that your keyboard has a slightly different layout than a PC, but there are ways that you can basically map your Apple key to command, or your Apple command key to a control, and everything works pretty seamlessly. So that's just
That's right.
from personal experience there.
Yeah, absolutely.
One other question is, at what size does a private cloud make sense? I think you're maybe wondering that if your firm is if smaller, that there may be some sort of threshold for where the costs of a private cloud don't make sense. But yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's not driven directly by size. Things tend to be more driven by, it goes from the needs of the law firm, defines what application or what software they need, and that really defines whether or not they should be on a private cloud. And what I mean by that is, as I sort of talked about, web apps like some of the ones I mentioned earlier, they often are really good fits for solo firms and small firms. And sort of the breaking point, or the cutoff, if you will, is roughly, and it varies from firm to firm, but roughly around 4 or 5 users, total staff in the firm, total users in the firm, is when we see law firms start to outgrow the web-based applications and really need the sophistication of some of the other apps I mentioned, like, again, Pro Law, Time Matters, Tabs, etc. And then they're faced with the decision of on-premise or private cloud. So that's sort of the cutoff, and that's kind of the journey, if you will, of how people end up in a private cloud and why.
All right. Next question um, is a private cloud always always cheaper or on par with on-premise, or is it ever not? I guess cost comparison versus
Yeah.
cloud versus on-site
Y-
servers.
Yeah, and that might be sort of a follow-up to my brief statement when I said that a private cloud, the costs are typically comparable to running IT on-premise and in-house. Um, and thereabouts, but more fixed. So if the question is that always the case? The answer is yes, with an asterisk, and the asterisk is assuming you're doing things right on premise. So if you're a law firm that buys a server, replaces it every 3 or 4 years, has a capable IT company that not only fixes things when they break, but has some sort of proactive plan or maintenance plan in place where they're managing backups, they're checking the vitals, they're making sure everything's up and running. If you're being proactive, and I don't mean Cadillac, if you're just following best practices with technology and being proactive, then a private cloud will, yes, always or almost always be comparable or even a little less than on premise. Where it's not, and it's on paper anyways, if you're the kind of law firm that spends as little as possible on technology, keeps your server around for 7, 8 years, only ever calls an IT company when things break, spends as little as possible, and is kind of proud of it, a private cloud by comparison will seem expensive because you're comparing doing things right to doing things very much not right. So that's kind of the answer. If you're doing things right, a private cloud will always make a lot of financial sense.
Gotcha. And I think this will be our last question for today, which is, can you run specific software in any private cloud?
Yeah, that might be a reference to authorization and support. Um, And if I understand the question right, some software companies don't weigh in with an opinion on who you can or can't or shouldn't host your software with. So some software, they don't have a cloud offering, and they're happy to let anyone in the world host it that wants to, right? Your local IT guy or a reputable private cloud company. But some software companies have acknowledged the phenomena that I described earlier, sort of that Wild West, where there's just a lot of small, sometimes fly-by-night companies doing this now. And unfortunately, law firms are learning the hard way that those are bad decisions. So one kind of good example of that is LexisNexis. So in the case of PC Law and Time Matters, hosting them in a private cloud, there's a short list of what they call authorized hosting providers, meaning providers that are reputable, reliable, and that have been vetted. And then the rest aren't. And the goal there was to, I think, bring some law and order to the Wild West and to keep out the riffraff, so to speak. So if you use, for instance, if you use PC Law and Time Matters, you're going to want to go with an authorized hosting provider. And regardless of the software you use, you should find out if there's a preferred or recommended hosting company or list of companies and work within that list to avoid those high-risk options that I talked about earlier.
All right, great. Well, thank you, Dennis. And I think that is going to wrap us up for today. And thank you all in the audience for attending, and thank you for the great questions. That will wrap us up. And if you have any follow-up questions, or if you weren't able to join us for the entirety of this webinar, this will be recorded, and you'll be able to check out the recording later. That'll be coming out, should be about tomorrow. And if you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to email us. Dennis, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, anyone can email me directly at Dennis, DENNIS .dimka, DIM as in Mary, KA, at uptimelegal.com.
Great. Thank you, Dennis. And thank you all for attending. Everyone have a great day.